because we want to open with the discussion that's here. And if you haven't done practicum or partnership models, you're just thinking about them, that's why this second question is pretty open. You know what we should do? Make the simulator happy. That's why I'm here. My son got sick in the rest of the work this weekend. And I'm not there. I'm sucky mother.
All right, well.
Sucky motherhood right here, right now. So, I was picking this up so I can send you.
Oh,
Awesome. Can you pick up? I'm gonna show us just for our person. We'll just stand there and look wise. So, yeah.
Now, do we want the PowerPoint in or not?
Yes, the PowerPoint in, that's why, yes.
I remember
Oh,
this
should we
discussion
go over?
to some extent about, so let me make sure I get all that in, okay, y'all, okay, 1, 2, 3. All right, let's see, it's still going.
Yes.
I'm not sure if it took, 1, 2, 3. Oh, wait, no, let me try it one more time, I hit the wrong button.
Okay.
Okay, 1, 2, 3. Now, do y'all want to do a silly one? That's what I was saying.
Well, do that. Yeah.
Okay.
There you go.
She looks like
Okay.
me, but they're used to that.
All right.
Okay. You want to do the road?
No, you do it.
Let's take another little bit of time. We don't want to interrupt. And then we're going to tell you what our thoughts are. Take about 30 more seconds and then we'll start the informal, formal part of the presentation. All right, so we're going to let you talk in just a second, but particularly at this point in any sort of experiential conference, I always find it's really important that we both honor you for making your way here, yay, and tell you what we're going to do with you so there's no surprises. And this looks like a lot, but it's really only 17 slides, and this is one of them when we've already seen the first one, so there's not a lot of stuff here. So we are going to talk with your opening survey to kind of see why you're here so that we can tweak and be responsive and make ourselves smaller as needed. Welcome, yay! And we're going to put context in from the conference so far. I've also learned that with clinical conferences especially, that it's really important to weave it into the history. And then we're going to talk about what we've done at Buffalo that's kind of, it's an externship, but not an externship, it's a practicum, and it's something that we're now expanding in light of the new ABA rules combined with all the new framework, or the new typical. And in particular, we're going to hear from literally the award-winning professor who teaches our pro se civil litigation practicum. She also serves as a vice dean, and she is truly amazing woman and teaches legal writing and has kids. I don't know how she does it, but she's amazing to me. I'll tell you a little about some of our other practica, and then we together will be talking about the new rules and the new landscape. We're also going to bring in just a little bit, because everyone, even if they're not in New York, needs to understand the New York skills stuff. So we're going to bring in a little bit about the New York skills. We'll get some handouts. These other handouts that look scary up here, they're not. They're just so you have them. And then we're going to talk about, kind of come together and talk about success and joy, because in the middle of the afternoon, we always need to end on something like that and your ideas. So that's where we're going with our time today. So why did you climb to the 3rd floor? What brought you to this session?
I'm looking outside the box of what I traditionally think field placements are.
Yeah, learn more about how you find practicum, what it really is.
Both of those, and I needed my steps also.
I'll be sure here,
I did come
and
to
to
the
the audience.
Right, I did not think it based on location. That's why I took the stairs instead of the elevator.
Okay, so nobody runs a practicum yet. Does anybody run a practicum? Yeah, you do.
Well, it's not that I'm the only clinician at my school, so
Oh, wow.
I direct an immigration clinic. I was previously director of experiential learning, and in that position, I was supposed to try to develop practicum courses, but then I also oversaw externships, so it's too much. But, so while I'm no longer in that position, I direct a clinic, I teach the externship class, but because I'm the person with the most experience on all of this and with the site visit coming up in 2019, I want to make sure that our interim dean and our new associate dean actually know what we should have been doing and need to be doing. So what makes me nervous? You know, it's just quantity.
Right.
Plus
Oh my
change.
God,
Quantity
something
plus
else
change.
to do and
Well,
teach.
plus changes, right, quantity plus changes.
Right.
Yeah.
Sorry, maybe I missed this completely. How do you define practicum course?
Well, this is actually something that Kim and I have been discussing. We'll hand that out too.
You know, I wasn't going to hand this out until later, but we've got a smaller group, so, because I don't like handing things out to bigger groups, because then people start reading and ignoring us. But we'll just glare at you, since you're such a big group. Wow. Don't pay attention. I don't know, many of you probably have seen this, but it might be helpful to have it in front of you. The glossary for experiential education. Have you seen this?
So this is something Kim introduced me to as well, and this is from the AALS
Yeah, AALS section.
section.
And if people haven't seen this, it's a really nice thing. It's online. It's a really nice thing to give your dean or associate dean. There'll be extra copies at the end, but it's a really helpful thing. So this was a big group of people who defined this, who made this document. We sent it out to CLIA, and then we sent it out to all CLIA, AALS clinical section memberships. And so it is defined in here in as broad a sense as it can be. So we've got that in there, but schools kind of use the term practicum in various ways. They also may use something simple, they may use labs, they may use some other word, lab. Sometimes lab means an offshoot of a clinical course, but some people have labs be a whole big course, it's like a practicum. So just the concept of what we're going to talk about is it's a placement that has a very strong classroom component that involves a paper that's more traditional and not like the classroom component of most externships, is how we've defined it. And so we'll talk about how it came to be. So who else has thoughts on what makes you nervous?
Or do you just want to hear?
Or do you just
What
want
we
us to launch
do
into things
first.
and then we'll talk later?
Yeah, I'm not familiar with what a practicum is.
Okay, so we will talk, let's talk about ours, and then we'll talk about some other models that I've found at other schools, including Georgetown, when we're going through this, and then we'll come back and circle back.
And on the very back of that handout she just handed out, that's where they define practicum, although I'm not sure how close or not we fit into that. I will just say quickly about, well, history and context, I don't know if you want to talk about what
Right,
we've
so I'm
learned already.
So I just want to say, this kind of is one of the places on for those of you who were there for the first plenary, really talking about how this all fits in. I think that practicum is something that's emerged in recent years. When I first heard the term as a legal practicum, it had emerged from Georgetown. And it was something when Deborah Epstein was the director who kind of created this as a concept. I'll tell you why I created it, but I think that it's a concept that schools are using in various ways. It's a concept that often is a term that other parts of the university are learning, so they may bring it over, especially if you're doing interdisciplinary work. And so it fits into the history and context of, now that we're in this space of experiential learning, it does fit in if designed like we've done, or Georgetown has done, or some other places have done, it does fit into the 6 credit mandate for the most part. So I just wanted to let you know that I think that it's part of the overall thing, and as we've been researching. One of the things that we're doing is talking to people here, and we're hoping to produce something, a short little thing that will have some tables of who was teaching things called Practica, or things that are Practica that may have different labels, that we've been compiling, and we've got over 30 schools that do things like this and define it in that way. But we've like found their stuff online. We haven't reached out and got their syllabi. We're in the process of doing that. We had high hopes when we were designing this of having all this time in January to do this, and then we ran out of time. So we'll have to deliver it later. But I'm going to turn this over to Bernadette.
So I'm not going to read this, right? This is a we should not have that on the screen. But let's talk about what it is really. So in the practicum that we've designed, we're talking about really strong collaborations between neighborhoods, courts, community partners. And you'll see that we actually partner with these different people to provide, or entities, to provide what we do. My practicum in particular, the Pro Se Civil Litigation Practicum, which is a mouthful, but it encompasses 2 different courts. So if you come up with a better name than I have while we're here, please let me know. But right now, this practicum encompasses both family court and federal court. And our practicum is embedded right in the courts. So we started off with no real office in family court. They then actually constructed us 2 offices, an intake office and a client attorney office. And in federal court, we started off there with beautiful space because they were building a new program, and this was important to the chief judge at the time, who was chairing their pro bono committee. So we started off with space there. We also now have a 3rd space in a neighboring city, because our federal court, the Western District of New York, is split between 2 cities. So there we have like a closet and then a podium outside of the closet, pretty much. But we're serving clients, we're getting it done. And you'll see here, we started Federal Bar Association, helped us, the president of the Federal Bar Association, to actually get attorneys on board. So that was very important. And also, we partnered in order to first hand pick our attorneys who were going to help us with this project. Erie County Bar Association Volunteer Lawyers Project, we partnered with them to provide an umbrella insurance coverage, which truly is so small that most of our federal court attorneys laugh at it. But it's $1 million in coverage. And most attorneys have their own riders through their firm that will do this type of work. But we partner with them. They don't have a federal attorney on staff. So I'm the federal attorney and the volunteer lawyers are federal attorneys. That's how we run that. Family court's a little bit different. And then of course us, the United States District Courthouse, and in the Erie County Family Courthouse, because they give us space. So they provide us the infrastructure to be embedded in the courts. And VLSP is just the sister organization, but in the neighboring city of Rochester. So that's how we've set this up. And there was a committee, Kim started, working with the federal courts in order to come up with this model. And then there was a larger committee about how to actually really structure and get it run. And Kim was the architect of that.
Well, let me just say one little thing, because
Yes.
this is what happened when your dean is very responsive. So somebody came in from the federal court, and then the judge came in and sat down with the dean at the dean's conference table, and the dean, without having me present, said, "Of course we'll start the pro se clinic, and it's gonna be a clinic, and Kim will get it going, she'll call you next week." And I'm like, awesome, so that's when, and we just done the criminal practicum, and I'm like, we totally have to make this a practicum, because we're gonna put, so we did this thing, and so the amazing Bernadette agreed to take this on in addition to all her other things. But literally, it was the dean promising something, and then we kind of created this, and then she took it to a much higher level than we had with the previous practicum, and made all these amazing community partnerships, and the students just adore this experience.
So, yeah, so I didn't want it to make it seem like I created this whole thing. It's
She
the
created the
structure
whole
that
thing
came
because
out.
I gave her a structure after the dean promised that the law school would do this.
Now, what was, and we had no budget.
Right?
So we had absolutely no budget to make this work, and we put it together. But of course, the description highlights are the immersion of students in an experiential learning experience. They assist lawyers in supporting pro se litigants, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. But they are the initial contact for all of the clients. So they do, and because we partner with the organization, unfortunately, we have financial qualifications. So 200% above the federal poverty guidelines are those financial qualifications. And money that comes in through grants actually goes to our community partner, not to us. So the interviewing of clients, all of that comes first, and that's all the students. Then the students will go in and brief the attorneys on what the issues are. This varies a lot from family court to federal court. They're very, very different courts. So in federal court, there's a lot more that the students have to do in terms of actual research to be able to advise on the problems that come in. So often, and if I'm the attorney that day, they'll interview, they'll come in, they'll tell me what the client has. So before they even go back, I might say, okay, make sure you get me this, this, and this, and by the way, you have to go check and see how we serve a school district, because that's not clear under, so Rule 4 of the federal procedure allows you to go to state law. State law is very confusing in New York on that issue, so then I might have to go research something like that and actually to advise the client. We have other things too. I oftentimes will say, get me a really recent Second Circuit case that has the elements laid out for, Section 1983 excessive force case. Because not that I don't know those elements, it's that I want to send the client away with it, right? Because we do limited scope, and in federal court, in family court, they keep it to like 20 minutes. That's it, 20 minutes, you're out. We can't do that in federal court. It just takes a little bit more time. It's not, the same things don't come in as constantly as they do in family court. So the themes in family court are almost always the same, not true in federal court. Then we have the traditional legal research and writing. So oftentimes we will do projects. The court is not our client. That would be a conflict. But we often do projects for the court, and we call it community education, so the court gets it, but everybody else could get it too, which will look at a particular legal issue and really discuss that issue so that it gives some guidance to the court, at least as a starting point, for how to address that issue and what's been done with it. What else do we do? We also do traditional legal research and writing for our community partner, the VLP or VLSP, when they have issues that they need advice about, or when we see certain clients coming in with something like civil forfeiture. And so we say, some of our attorneys who are former law clerks can do civil forfeiture. Other attorneys never dealt with it before. So we often write things that will be used then to advise our clients. And then finally, research, write, present, and publish free access white papers on particular topics. This could be a substantive topic, it could be a social justice topic more broadly, or it could be an access to justice topic. So I don't know if you can read this, just a snippet of my syllabus. This is the very first class, and in the very first class we have them read a lot to prepare for working in the courts. I'll share my syllabus if anybody wants it. But we have, so our intake manuals, our attorney manuals, statistics, and then our ethical rules. And we actually, because of questions from attorneys, we actually partnered with our community partner to write to the New York State Bar Association and get an ethics opinion on limited scope legal services, because that's what we offer in my practicum. So, this I won't spend a lot of time on, but I do want to maybe talk, now that I'm here, about limited scope, because we don't take on long-term clients in this practicum. It is clients who walk in, who have a particular issue, and we advise them then and there. So there are limited scope retainer agreements, and they actually have to sign it, they have to understand what limited scope is, then we advise. The white papers are really interesting because students actually love these. We put, 10 to 12 pages is usually what they write. So it's not a full seminar paper, but they do research on so many different topics, and I'll show you what some of those are. So Heck versus Wallace, that was a big issue that we actually did. This was about a 25, 30-page paper that we did to advise the court. Ethical rules, so one of our students did a 50-state survey on limited scope representation and how that works in terms of conflict rules. Civil Gideon, we looked at various states' approaches to this, rights to an interpreter and privilege issues, because a lot of times when you have people walk in, if they don't speak English or don't speak it very well, they'll have someone with them who can act as an interpreter. So one of our students actually did the research, and with one of our committee members, who is a partner at a large firm, he brought in some ideas, and we created a form that allows the interpreter to come in, the friend who's the interpreter, or the family member who's the interpreter. This works a little bit more seamlessly in federal court. In family court, you have to determine whether that person should be allowed to come in as an interpreter, right? Because you could have issues, right? They could be partners, or there could be domestic violence issues and things like that. I put in, just so that you know, even though I'm the federal court person, right to kinship care. We do family court issues as well. Codifying and defining presumption of joint custody. So we do a lot of different work. These papers, some of them can be used by our community partner as actual legal research to inform their work. Others, the Civil Gideon, that's more of an access to justice topic. But all of these can be published. I haven't published every single paper coming out of it, but they can be published on the website, so there's free access to all. So, just to give you an idea, this was our first semester.
Just talk about the classroom component, because I think you've launched into the service component.
Sure. So the classroom component, the way it's actually structured is that we have a once-a-week 3-hour course. So the students come into the classroom, and you saw a snippet of the syllabus there. But if you were to look at the rest of the syllabus, so for example, I'll do supporting pro se litigants in federal court. What does that mean? Well, what's an informer pauperis application? What is service, a motion for service by the court marshals? What forms do we already have that if someone comes in with a complaint, we can't draft that entire complaint. So we start with the pro se guidelines from federal court, and we start with a model complaint that's been adopted by the courts. And we'll give them, what does a summons look like? How are you going to have to serve? So all those things come into play. So we'll actually do that in the courtroom. Then we do other substantive topics. For example, we get a lot of employment law. We get a lot of civil rights. So I do a whole class on Section 1983. I also teach an advanced research and writing course on civil litigation, or civil rights litigation. So a lot of that is drawn from my work as a lawyer and as a teacher in research and writing. But we do those actual substantive topics. Now, that doesn't mean that the law student will go out and advise, but when they're working with a volunteer attorney, the volunteer attorney may not know what the statute of limitations is for Section 1983 claim, because it goes back to state law and et cetera. So that's something that we have prepared, and our students know it. We also we always make sure we have the law, an updated law, right? We don't just rely on a student's knowledge. But you can see, this was from our very first semester, 780 pro bono hours logged by students. This is not the hours logged by volunteer attorneys, which would be separate. 600 plus clients, yeah, question.
So when you say 780 pro bono hours logged, how many, the students, I'm assuming get here 3 hours a week in class, they get the 3 credits for the classroom component.
We haven't really broken it down. They do 120 hours of service work.
Okay.
So they do the 3-hour classroom component plus 120 hours of service work.
So how, approximately what's that, so 12 hours?
It's about
10 to 12 hours a week.
a week, right, exactly,
And they keep their hours on Clio. All Practicum students keep hours on Clio.
right. And you can see this is when we did our interpreter confidentiality forms, Spanish
Wait, you have one more
translation.
question?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry, so
Yeah,
you
go
don't
ahead.
distinguish between the in-class and out-of-class credits? You just,
No.
how many credits do students get for this whole?
4.
And that students don't worry about the in-class, out-of-class ABA
Well,
concerns?
here's what the issue is really for us.
Why does it apply? If it's meeting once a week for 3 hours,
That-
and it's got a paper, it's got everything else, it's a course.
That's
So
in-class.
that's it, right, so that we view all of that, and then we view the 120 hours, all of that as 50 hours, and we've had people tell us it's nice, the way that we interpret it. So it's not separate, it's all one course.
Right, and ABA hasn't come back and said, hey,
No,
that's
because
not
it's
in
just
class.
something, because if you looked at her readings, these students do way more than 4 credits.
Yeah, yeah,
And nobody
someone's-
said any problem with the one, it's just like an assignment, they have to do 120 hours and they have to do all this reading and all this kind of stuff. So it really is a class and all of our practicum courses are designed and are viewed as the same as a seminar. It's just a part of your assignment is you have to do 120 hours of this service work.
Right. I'm just thinking of what we have in our school, and we currently separate.
Right.
And hearing this, I'm wondering,
You don't have
You might not
to,
need
you don't
to.
have to anymore, and this has been totally, we had our ABA inspection, we've talked about this with everyone, and everyone views this as a thing that it's viewed as a seminar course, so it's counted for the 50-minute hours, so that's why the 120 hours. Because our externships have to do more hours than that, because we don't have an in-person classroom component, and they don't write separate papers, and it's
So
not
in
like a
other words,
class.
like if I do, this winter, I had someone do staffing in our court in Rochester.
Yep.
So to get 1 credit hour for that, they had to do 45 hours
Yep.
of staffing, right?
Yep.
So when we break it out, yes, we do look at, that component of it. But as far as this practicum course goes, and we struggle with this all the time, because is this purely a clinic? I mean, I'm a supervising attorney as part of this. So, and the work that we do that isn't just advising face-to-face with clients, that's all done as part of me being a supervising attorney. So yeah, I mean, it's interesting to talk about and to think about, because we've gone, yeah.
So the time they spent on site is effectively an assignment?
Yes. So that's how we created this, because we have this strong classroom component with everything else. And I mean, this is totally personal that I did after I discussed this with Georgetown, is this is a thing that gets a lot of respect from our podium classroom teachers, because papers come out at the end that look like things, and so so there's this whole thing, but then the students are still doing 120 hours of work, so the community partners, it's just like this really interesting amalgam, but this happens in different ways in the other clinic, which she's just explaining for some great depth, and she's so rich and literally has won awards with the work that she's done here. But it's a rigorous class, and at the end of the semester, she's always incredibly tired because this is a huge, heavy lift for her to condition teaching legal writing and being a vice dean.
Well, I won't spend too much time on this, but you get the idea of the type of projects that come out of it, right? And so we can talk more, this is just one of our court trips in our new federal court building. Students love this experience, by the way. This is not something they look at like a fluff course. It's a lot of work, and most students will not take it when they're taking their advanced legal skills. They break it into different semesters. But all of the feedback from our students has been amazing. Our connections with the courts it's just grown immensely because we're taking, and not just the judges, but also people like the clerk staff, because we're taking those hard pro se litigants that they have a hard time dealing with, we're taking them away, right? They're coming to us, we can answer legal advice, not just legal information. And so it's been a really positive experience. Also, our community partner, it's not the same as sending someone to their office where they're responsible for that. So they don't have the kind of supervisory load on their shoulders. So it's a really nice way to provide, and I think you see just for, now we've been doing this for 4 years, so we have something like over 5,000 hours of pro bono service logged, not counting attorney pro bono service. Our volunteer lawyers love it because if you are a federal court practitioner, you'll know if you're appointed counsel, that's a case that could last for 6 or 7 years, easy. So this allows them another way, and they're required under the federal court rules to give back through pro bono service. This allows them to come in, they can do it as many times as they want a semester, but they could do it once or twice a semester and log a good, 4 to 6 hours of pro bono service doing it this way. And in fact, we have 45 different attorneys as part of our, I don't know what you want to call it, log of volunteers. So, and they also love working with the students too. So it's a really nice way to get high-level attorneys, get them working with your students, get the connection to the alumni. All of that works really, really well. But I won't spend any more time on my course. Oh, I'm sorry, question.
I think this is probably obvious to everyone, but I just want to make sure I understand. You do count this as experiential under the rules,
We do.
right? I mean, even though it's not necessarily a clinic or an externship or a simulation. And have y'all been through a site visit?
Yes.
I mean, okay, cool. 'Cause
And that's the weird thing, is we're in between. It's not an externship, it's a field placement.
Right, but it seems to fit completely within the
It
purpose.
does.
So,
It does, but that's why we really wanted to do this, because then we really want to write about it, because it's really easy. So let me just tell you, I want to like move to topic, but I just want to tell you, we do this in a couple other ways. The first practicum we created was because we didn't have, when I arrived, we didn't have any true experiential learning for, in the criminal law area, and we have a lot of people who are interested in this, so we created a criminal law practicum. And how that works is it works with our assigned counsel for Erie County, so the assigned counsel gets an assigned student, and so this strong classroom component where they're learning criminal procedure, where they're learning theories, where they're learning how to interview clients, where they're learning all sorts of stuff that one learns and things like this, and they have to write a paper. But they also get assigned counsel, and they follow the assigned counsel around, and so they're totally, unlike they're totally dispersed. So, so you get somebody, and then you're going off and you're doing your stuff, and so you're doing something else, and then you end up having to figure out if this gun is admissible or not admissible, and you're an assigned counsel, so you don't have time to really do the research, but you've got a student who has to give you 120 hours of research, so they can go off and they spend 75 hours writing the most awesome memo that you can then present, and then you get to exclude the gun, which you wouldn't have had time to research. So it's like this win-win type of situation, but that's a really different, that's more like a traditional externship, because then you're bringing them in, even though they're all assigned counsel, and the head of the assigned counsel office co-teaches this practicum. It's different because they're really doing totally different things. And then another one that I created was the Healthy Homes Legal Practicum. I do environmental law, so we had a Healthy Homes Legal Practicum where we co-teach with somebody from our neighborhood legal services who does housing issues. and one of our other legal writing people who has incredible experience in lead poisoning. And so we all co-taught the classroom component. I haven't taught it in a couple of years because I had to do other things, but hopefully someday we'll rebirth it. And so it was co-taught with skills, you know, the history of lead, bring in lots of people. And then the students would go to a couple of different places. So one student would go to housing court. One student would go to work with legal services, and one student would go to work with legal aid. So there's a very different set like that, so it's a little bit dispersed, but it's all with the same rigor, and they're all ending up writing these really great papers. And twice we did conferences for the city of Buffalo and related areas who were working on lead poisoning and on other healthy housing issues. We did conferences through this program, and that's a different course. And now, because I don't have enough to do, and I'm very bored and sitting around at my home wondering what to do with my time, we had a veterans clinic and we ran out of money. There's a lot of needs, so we've moved it into, we got a Justice for Heroes grant, and we're creating a Veterans Practicum. So I'm in the process of creating a Veterans Practicum, which I'm not going to personally teach, I'm just creating and then handing it off. But we're using the same model of creating a strong classroom component that has both substance and skills and practice issues in it that will result in having papers come out, but that will also result in them having to do 120 hours. So I know that there's too much stuff on this slide, and that's because I didn't have time to make a prettier slide. But the big thing is it's 120 hours a week, which is about 10 hours a week, plus the weekly classroom work. So that's kind of the theme throughout, no matter what we're doing in Practica. And so they have to journal, they have to reflect and self-evaluate. We've made sure that we are meeting all the requirements in this, and we do publish most of it. As Bernadette says, if it's a really crappy paper, we don't publish it. And I have always been successfully able to say to the student, you know, this isn't your best work. Do you want to take some time and revise it and get it back to me? And then we can do it, and they go off after class, and then they never finish it, so they don't get it put up. So this is how I've always not done it to that. And so that's too much text, but that's just our overall model for the Practicum, which is different than other Practica, but it's a really interesting thing that's become very, very important to people within the community. The veterans world is very excited that we're going to be doing something, even though we can't have the clinic, but there's a lot of people who want to volunteer and do the veteran stuff, so that's been going. The healthy housing, they continue to beg. The community foundation is like, we'll give you some money to help you with summer students if you can just do it again. I'm like, we just don't have the bandwidth to do this because I'm doing the environmental clinic and doing other things, so we tried to move some of it over there. But it's a really healthy model to use within certain communities. Our communities have really loved it. And so, so it's really been nice to, as I said, we have criminal law, healthy homes, and veterans. We also had a wonderful one that we're trying to figure out how to rebirth, which is the federal reentry. So our reentry court, Monica Wallace, who was legal writing faculty, amazing legal writing faculty, has now gone on to be elected representative within the legislature. She's busy in Albany, so she can't teach our classes, but she did a really great job with that, and we're trying to figure out how to do that. Here's what it costs the law school. It costs the law school paying a small override, like a minuscule override of a couple $1,000s a year to faculty who are not full-time, who are not tenured faculty. Tenured faculty do it for free, but non-tenured faculty do it as with this tiny override, plus they hire an adjunct, plus the law school commits to paying for the equivalent of 30 hours a week for the summer so that we can keep the Pro Se help desks open over the summer. So there is a commitment of about $10,000 to $12,000 a year that the law school does for each practicum. But it's minimal because it's something that they get 2 big courses out of and a lot of community goodwill. So that's kind of the reality of it. It's not costless,
Yes,
but the former went back when we had a vice dean for skills. The first person who held the vice dean for skills, they ran around and told everybody in every meeting he could go to once we created the criminal law practicum, because he was a criminal law expert, that we should just do this everywhere because it was so cheap, we could get all this great work done and do all this great work. So there's lots of people in our building who think we should have more practicum. So it's an interesting thing that happens. Yeah.
When you say the cost of 30 hours per week for keeping the help desk open during the summer, what?
Because we have one extra, because we used to have 2 research assistants to help cover the student work that we would normally do for all the clinics in the building for the summer. That's how we get some summer coverage, because the students don't pay for clinics in the summer. That was part of my package when I walked in, is we need to have RIs. So I negotiated adding another summer student. So we now have 3 summer RIs that are guaranteed to be paid for by the school. And the reason it's 30 hours is because under the state law, actually it's 29 hours, because under state law, if you go over 30 hours, then you have to pay the benefits.
How many, are your enrollment in these practicums capped, or how many students do you have?
The most I've ever taken into my practicum is 8.
I won't take more than 6. Because it's just, because you have to supervise them, so it's a lot, and so it ranges. And in the event there's like only 1 or 2 students that apply for the crim law practicum, for 2 semesters, what we've done is we have this overflow course called the Advocacy Practicum, where if you have a student, we use it for a couple other things. So we've put it into that realm. We haven't had the whole criminal practicum because the law school doesn't want to pay an adjunct just to teach 1 or 2 students. So what happens is it goes to the Advocacy Practicum, we still place them, and then guess who gets to teach the course?
Yeah.
So that's my downfall for having designed these, is like if you have students who are doing this, you want to keep serving, but you don't make a class, and we're not going to pay an adjunct, then we just have this Advocacy Practicum thing that happens that I then use as a tutorial. And for that, I do increase the number of hours because but I do a weird thing because I meet with them every other week. I don't meet with them every week. And it's just a tutorial rather than a full-on class, although you do the readings and do trainings.
For the pro se
Yeah. Civil litigation.
project. You wanted to call it clinic, it really sounds.
I think it was my fault. I think it was named before she got there, right? Was it, or did you?
I don't know,
help me?
it's that we have 2 different really types of law going on in it.
Right.
So the office that's at the court, who runs that office?
So that office is, so we have them in each of the 3 courts. Those are our offices. So we have locking cabinets and things like that we can keep information in. But who runs them is that we have students go, and either I will be there or a volunteer attorney will be there. Now, from VLP, we do have someone who will go over, but she's not admitted in federal court, so she's not an attorney there. She's more if a volunteer attorney is coming on, someone who's new, someone she has to sort of introduce to the concept or make feel comfortable, or because VLP wants to keep their roster of attorneys going, she sometimes calls herself a cruise director. So she can sort of make those connections for VLP.
And who did you say the volunteer attorneys are?
Volunteer attorneys, we originally handpicked a set of attorneys. They had to be out at least 10 years. They had to have significant federal practice. We started with a core of former federal law clerks because not everybody who's a federal practitioner understands, for example, civil rights litigation. So we really at first had a handpick. Now, as people have been practicing, we've recruited more attorneys. So we went from a roster of probably, and we had a pretty big roster to begin with, about 15 members of our federal bar, and now we've grown that to about 45.
And do you have training for the volunteer?
We do.
attorneys?
Yep, we give them CLE credit for that. So they partner with us, we do a training, and then periodically, like I just got done with another CLE training, because as we bring new people on, we'll partner and do it. Or as sort of a, after our last CLE training, we had a nice happy hour sponsored by a firm, and to say thank you for all their work.
But the agreements that we have, we don't have an agreement, but we don't have traditional MOUs. because they tend to be more place-based, and you can't really have an MOU as for with the court.
We can't have an MOU with the court, that would be a conflict, we don't work for the court. Would they give us office space because they want the service, but we don't work for the court. So even like initially, they were bringing our interns in and calling them interns, and I said, you can't do that. Like, if you have to put them through security each and every time, then that's what you need to do. But you can't, they're not interns to the court, they're giving legal advice to people with cases in the court. Now, there are some programs that run, the Southern District of New York has one, where the court actually funds an independent attorney to do what our program does. So there are other models of this, but they require a full-time attorney on site, yeah.
The clerk of my federal district where we're located is an attorney. Could you have an agreement with the clerk of federal court? Would that
Well,
work?
see, I don't think so. I think you have to, if you partner with a community partner, I think that's where your MOU would come in. Because it's sort of like having an embedded clinic.
Mhm.
So, yeah.
We'll go ahead and finish here.
Oh, no, that's what I was gonna say.
So my question is more along the sort of course. So you said it's always full-time faculty who teach these practicums?
Full-time faculty are affiliated with a classroom component.
I'm a little different, and in the federal reentry practicum was a little different as well, because we were full-time faculty, we're also licensed attorneys in those areas. So with the federal reentry practicum, we did partner with our legal aid for that one. But a lot of the work that was done, for example, toolkits for people who are reentering and need to get licenses back, or even limited licenses to be able to work. Like, you know, a whole toolkit was created so it could be used for all clients coming afterwards. So those I think are a little bit different than having just a faculty member who teaches, who's not actually involved with any of the practice. It's a little, you know.
Do you ever have adjuncts teach the substantive law class?
They co-teach the substantive
They
law class.
co-teach the
Yes.
substantive.
In my case, I have an adjunct who's a specialist in family law. She was with the family court for years and years and years. Now is a law clerk for another judge. She comes in and teaches the family law component, because that's just not my area of law.
Right, but that's just
That piece of it.
just that piece of
Yeah.
it. She's not the adjunct faculty for the course, is
No.
what I'm hearing.
Sorry.
But it's different per the thing is, it's different per practicum. We actually are going to be paying one of our adjuncts who has an active practice in veterans law to be co-teaching the practicum starting in the fall with whomsoever ends up teaching it in the law school. So we've got this whole thing, so we tweak it a little bit depending on what's happening with what we're doing. But he's also active in a lot of the groups who do pro bono work around the area of Western New York. So it's like, I don't have a one size
There's
fits all.
there's
Right,
there's
this is like an overall plan, but it's a little bit different depending on what you're doing. And when Monica Wallace was teaching the pro se, the reentry, the legal aid attorney co-taught it with her, and co-taught every class with her, and was paid as an adjunct.
Okay, thank you. And then is there a reason why you're primarily only doing this, or it sounds like in the public interest space versus doing some of this in the private sector?
We don't have, as the State University of New York, we don't have any externships or opportunities for service learning in private spaces. So they have to be affiliated with a nonprofit or something like that, or the judicial branch.
And one of the reasons why is because New York has a 50-hour pro bono requirement for the bar. So obviously the practicum is 120, but they'll definitely get their 50 pro bono just through that one course.
Right.
So for us, putting it with a private entity wouldn't serve the same function for our law school. Plus, we have a strong, the University of Buffalo has a really strong public service, history, and clinical history. So I think this is less about, I don't want to say less, but there's a client, and that client's needs have to come first and foremost, and that public service, that pro bono service has to come first and foremost. And then the experiential part is a beautiful, side of that, but it's not just about the experiential.
So, but I can imagine it being different, and I know that some of the places that call them practicums or some other word, but they're really doing something similar to this, are doing them in private settings as we're unfolding this. The majority still are doing them in public service and HHA settings. But I can imagine it working that way. One of the things we wanted to do was talk about how this fits into the rules. We've already touched on how it fits into the ABA rules, which we've been talking about ad nauseum, so we don't need to hand that up. But we do want to talk about this, the skills requirement. And we've got some handouts for this for those of you who don't. Have you all had trainings in the skills requirement for New York? Well, here's a little tiny crash course in the skills requirement for New York. A couple of years ago, the bar created an opportunity for students to really be sure that they were trained in skills as they went forward with their practice. And so, so this, I'm handing you out two different things because there's lots of stuff on here. I don't know if I'm handing out too much or whatever, hand them around. This just went into force this year for 2Ls, so this is kind of something that we're really been thinking about a lot. It's a skills and values component, and it's different than the ABA requirement because they've set out pathways by which you can meet these requirements. Have any of you heard any of this?
Yes.
Okay, so the thing about this is this, we definitely believe that all the practica definitely meet pathway 1. So that's what we're going to be doing about that. And one of the things that we definitely do in all of these courses is explore for at least a class, then often for more than a class, specifically and with great intention explore ethics issues as well in these classes. As an aside, because some of you don't practice in New York, any questions on how you all are trying to help your students fulfill these requirements? Because it can't just be with the ABA. You have to have a formal rule about the pathways. We had a crappy thing that was up before. We've just actually revised our pathways, a document that's going up next week. That's just been through all the things that's going up next week.
So we're having a lot of discussions about this.
Yeah.
So I'm from Boston College Law School. And we have a fair number of students that
You
go
go
to
to Europe, right?
pathway 1 or I think pathway 4 is the primary discussion right now. But what's interesting is that it's, we're kind of waiting. Some New York schools, Fordham, for instance, I think it's just at pathway 1 and they posted it on their website and say, hey, our courses,
Right.
and our other requirements fulfill these skills. But our question comes into play with our LLM program. I mean, it's a small LLM program.
And it's just important now because it's just applying next year. Yeah.
So, but we're in discussions, we have a small LLM program, but we pull in students from France, from countries, and we have relationships with school like the Sorbonne, where for some reason pathway 1 doesn't work for them because they don't have enough credit. That piece is not my
Right, and
deal.
there's not actually numbers in the pathway 1.
Sorry, they can't take, because they're coming over,
They can't take enough
they
number.
can't take it,
They have to take certain other courses.
yes.
Yes.
And so
have
they
to
can't
move
get
to the other
this.
one. Yep.
So do you have a 2-year JD program as
No,
well?
so
Or is
for
it-
LLMs, yeah.
No, so our LLMs are only over for 1 year.
1 year, and that's why you have to go to pathway 4 and 5, and those
So-
are hard.
Those are hard, and so that's interesting you say we have to, because that's the debate that's happening between our LLM program.
We would firmly say probably
So
that
that's
if somebody can't take those, because the way that we do is all of our LLMs must take something that counts as an experiential course.
Yep.
That's an absolute mandate.
Is it more
an
than
LLM?
one?
They take one, and then they have to take a writing experience. And so because the writing experience, and it's not mandated, LLM doesn't mandate that, but all of our writing experiences are designed to count to meet the ABA requirement. So
Yep.
that's why we say that all of our LLMs will meet that.
So how do you get them, is it a one-year LLM?
Yeah, but we'll get those two, they have to take those two courses to look at those two things in, because the writing is not a
So in other
requirement for
words,
LLM.
under the ABA standards.
Yep.
Any of the writing courses, the first year is not going to be able to count
Yes.
towards the skills, right?
Yep.
So we have an LLM course developed and we have an advanced legal writing skills
Yes.
developed. So both of those could count towards the skills requirement, even
For the
for,
experiential. credit.
yeah, for
Right.
experience, well,
But
for,
also for the New York
sorry,
skills.
sorry.
For the New York skills, but also for the
For
experiential.
experiential, right. And as a simulation.
Yep. And so our writing course can count, like the way that.
If
our-
you it depends on how it's designed. Our legal
Yeah.
writing faculty committed to meet those standards, so yes.
And ours did too, I mean.
So yes, so that's how we do
development
it. But we haven't been challenged in that, and I don't know who's gonna challenge, I don't know who's gonna fight and challenge on the LLMs. It's just gonna be an interesting thing to see how the court unfolds on that. The court
Right.
was very excited, and I think the court's chilled a little bit, and I'm gonna be, I can report back later, because I'm gonna be on a panel with Chief Judge Rivera in May at the Access to Justice conference, where we're gonna be talking more, because now this is the year that we're starting to figure out what's going on with LLMs. So I'm gonna be able to circle back and talk with people, and everybody, not just me, everybody's there is like gonna be, because she's the person in charge of this, obviously. So it's a weird world that we're entering into to figure out how to do this, because it's really weird for me, for some of the non-native English speakers who've struggled to get through these courses, and then we're telling the court, oh yeah, they have the skills.
Well, the LLMs, we don't require an LSAT score for. So we have two, well, an LSAT.
Yep.
Right, and the TOEFL, I think they do look at, but those can be so easily manipulated.
Yes.
With our 2-year JDs, we look at an LSAT,
Yep.
which gives you a little bit better indication because the TOEFL can still be manipulated. Now, our 2-year program is just entering, I think it's second or third year, and that's been a challenge as well, because there are some students who come in who don't have the writing and communication skills that it appeared that they did have from their application materials.
Right.
So, yeah, those students are, are unique. Now, some of them have gone through my practicum, for example, or my advanced legal writing course, and have done, really, really well. But we still have a percentage, and these are not huge classes. I think our 2-year JD is 8, and our LLM program is like 3 or 4 this year. It's not big.
Right.
But our main concern from the classes they take, coming in as a 2-year JD, we've got those covered under the New York standards, but the LLMs, that's what we're still
Right.
working on, and we think we'll be
Right.
able to meet it this one way.
And quite frankly, it's also why we created this thing called the Advocacy Practicum, where if we don't feel comfortable putting them in a placement with somebody in the community, and we want to be able to give them something, somebody within the school can teach this class, and there's now 3 of us who've taught this thing called the Advocacy Practicum, and we just have kind of designed it so that we can figure out how to get them some training in a very handheld, small, really focused situation. But this is very much a work in progress for us with our international students.
And that's a simulation course, you guys said?
The Advocacy Practicum has a fieldwork component, but we can really handpick who they're going to do it with and what they're going to do.
The advanced legal writing is a simulation course.
So, yeah. So I think that I picked this picture because I think that, if you look at the top of it, look at the lovely sunset. You look at what's going on with us, and we're like, this is so hard for us. We've got these new rules, and then the ABA says, and we're changing them, and all we're doing is moving some language from another rule, and we're like, that doesn't look like it's exactly all you're doing. It's like this whole, we just are settling into it, getting used to the new rules, and then they're moving things around, and then the way that people like me who do the site visits are seeing things implemented. we're saying, we don't know if this meets it, and then everybody's saying, shh, we're not gonna put that in the report, and so it's like a really interesting landscape that we're all navigating together. And I think that that's part of why the AALS clinical section put together this glossary, but it's also a work in progress, and we're gonna revisit it because people are using terminology, and I think terminology is just gonna change at a couple of years now that we're really doing this, and people are creating new things, because what's the other thing that's happening to all of us, or maybe not all of us, there may be a few of you who are living in a world that I want to move to, it's like Candyland, but for most of us, the resources aren't out there, and so we're being asked by our deans to do a whole heck of a lot more with a whole heck of a lot less resources, and so we're like, do all this stuff, and don't fall in the mud while you're doing it, is why I picked that landscape.
So, my school is really small, it's regional, Southern California, and it's only every now and then that we have a student or a graduate who contacts us and says, basically says, I want to take the New York bar.
So you have to certify me.
Well, so I don't think we've had this yet since New York has done this, right? I mean,
Right, it's only this year, it's only this year that they would have been, they should be
Right,
certified.
but if
Last year it would
somebody,
have been
so
certifications, yeah.
I mean, like, when I read this,
I know, it's
I'm
huge,
reading
it's
it
scary.
and I'm like,
And they just reissued this new one in January with so much more stuff than the first one.
well, right, so I'm reading it and I'm just thinking, I can't, I have no idea whether we would need the 15
Well,
credits.
yeah,
I
that's,
think that-
here's what, I mean, they can go, I forget which pathway it is now, but they could have 15
So that,
clinical
like, the
credits.
school wouldn't necessarily have to say, yes, we do, like, our program definitely needs this. It could be the individual student, because I think
Yes.
every student of ours would
Yes.
need at least the 6 credits from the 6 credit ABA requirement, right? And then,
Right, but the argument from the court is that it has to be, you have to certify a higher level of competency that you've tested and observed it. Now, I think, quite frankly, that the new outcome measures and assessments overlay on that makes that argument that the court makes to us every flippin' single time they talk about it wrong. Because I think that the ABA is kind of committed to outcome measures and assessments, and that covers it. And that's what Clea's arguments were about it, so when I help craft those arguments, but I think that, here's the secret thing that, here's the secret thing, I don't think that the court is going to question you. The court is really trusting schools on this, as long as schools say that they're doing things. And if you look at an individual student and you've got a rigorous course of education, that you've got outcome measures and assessments in your experiential learning, and you believe that therefore you're really assessing them well on this and that they're ready, then I think if you write a letter to that effect, the court will be fine.
but I mean, so I haven't read
Right,
this.
somebody from your registrar's office does need to write that letter if they're applying to them. They do need to the certification needs to happen for the court, not before the bar exam, but before they're actually admitted. Which is just a new thing that all of us are dealing with.
Can I ask about the 50 hours?
Yeah. Oh, we didn't even bring that. Look, see, we should have brought more handouts. Yes.
Just curious, like how folks are dealing with that. Are you having the students actually give you the amount of hours that they worked with and, whatever they're using?
Well, if we're in a practicum or a clinic, they're required to keep hourly timesheets.
Right.
So
And an
every week-
externship.
An extra.
So
Yeah,
all,
and
so
extra
that,
stuff.
and all but 10% of our students go through one of those.
Yeah. Now, they can do the 50 hours, they could also do 50 hours volunteer work over summer in an internship for a government or non-for-profit legal services agent. It's gotta be legal work. So it can't be, I'm volunteering for Greenpeace. That
Right.
doesn't
But it's
work.
also, the 50-hour pro bono is much broader than other things. The 50-hour pro bono can be helping me write a white paper on something. So somebody can do that and help me on something. It can be very broad. It doesn't have to be, it's not like the pro bono scholars that have to be addressing indigency. I could be writing about access to justice for salamanders. And as long as it's something that's like, we should be saving the wetlands for salamanders, but it's something that I'm doing and that a student is helping with, they get their pro bono hours from assigned faculty. So it was written very broadly by deans to make sure the students could meet it.
And also include judicial, I mean, things that
Yes.
traditionally we don't think of.
Traditionally, we don't think of as pro bono, yes, it's
But
judicial,
like
it's
our
everything.
business clinic, I think we require that, since we don't have, any kind of indigency, the way the
Right.
FAQs are written, that it'd be a nonprofit client. We have for-profit clients in that clinic that we take on as well.
Right.
So we don't count the hours for the.
Right,
for
yeah,
our-
you're right, right.
Yeah.
But that's okay, but the 50-hour rule has a and I didn't bring, but that isn't totally, so if you want to send me something, I can get back to you on that, because the 50-hour rule is written very broadly for what counts. We have had no problem with finding, I mean, I've had people wondering because they're late, but I've never had a problem coming up with something that they could easily fit in before their admission. And our Vice Dean for Social Justice also has helped with that. They wondering if they're clueless and haven't figured out, they find us and then we do it.
Our experience too is most of their 1L, majority of 1L summer jobs.
Are gonna be
That
free, yeah.
issue is,
Yeah.
they should print out the New York form, because I
And
had
get it
3L,
signed,
some be like,
yes.
oh, I never had, and then, well, why don't you reach out to them? But I haven't talked to them in 2 years,
But they need to do it at the time.
Months contacting
Right.
us, and, even for us, it's like just figuring out their hours for
So.
all these years ago.
Well, we were thinking there might be more people, so we were planning on doing a small group since we've had the conversation. However, there's been a couple of you who haven't talked much. So I want to just give a moment for those of you who have been sitting there who may.
We have like 3 minutes. What
I
do you
know.
want to do? No.
No, but I don't want to be big in the room because there might be people who are just sitting there because we've been talking about things. Is there anything we haven't talked about that would fulfill your reasons for having dedicated an hour and 15 minutes of your time and other than getting steps? For what would be helpful for you?
No, but I have a different question.
I just want to give a couple minutes of, I don't know if you tell your students this rule, but if I ask a question, I always give people 7 seconds before I close the door to it, because the sociologists used to tell me that people need 7 seconds to think.
Well, other questions?
Okay.
Okay, so 2 things. On number, I guess subsection 6, where it says the student may earn up to 6 of the 15 credits through a certified non-credit bearing certified summer employment
Yeah.
supervisor. What is that?
They can go do pro bono, they can do work at some sort of summer employment. There's a special form that New York has to fill out that we send them to on our website that
Oh.
they do that. But for 15 hours, they can do some of it in the summer.
Okay, it's just that I didn't know that the whole certified by the law.
It's certified, yes.
So
There's
that's- it's a New York
an
thing.
actual form
Okay,
on the actual website that you can go to, that you have your person fill out that summer. Just going back to the thing of you have to fill out that summer, or then finding it later can be a nightmare if they're trying to get admitted.
okay.
So yes.
And if the student hasn't actually somehow met 15 credits of experiential-based coursework in the law school, I mean, it's not just that the school doesn't certify the person's.
They haven't met it, yeah.
If
Then
they
they
just
can't do
haven't
that
met it,
pathway.
then
Then they can't do that pathway, they can do another
they
pathway.
can do one or the other. Okay.
Right.
So that's why just about every school is primarily satisfying it with pathway 1. And pro bono scholars. I mean, so pathway 1, pathway 3 are the main pathways people are using.
So in other words, under pathway 1, you can create what you say qualifies them at this level of competency. So in other words, you could decide, you can't double dip under the ABA rules, but you could have your first and second semester writing classes be part of what you're gonna include for that pathway. I mean, that's created,
Right.
yes, I
You
think
don't
someone
have to
can
do
look
that.
at it, but it's created by the school, how the students can meet
Right.
it. So you could have
Right.
curriculum planning that does it. We've looked at Cornell's, which breaks down, different classes and the skills that they need and things like that. It's a,
Okay,
yes.
okay.
It's
Right,
it's
no,
really weird, but it's, right, it's a very, well, the first time you read it, it's like that, and literally, I quite frankly think that anything that's only a couple pages long, but then has a frequently asked questions thing that's this many pages double-sided, needs to be rewritten. But I'm not gonna touch Judge Rivera that, because she might actually put me on the committee and make me help with that, so I'm not gonna mention that to her at all.
We've had a lot of things that, Chief Judge Littman, who was before Rivera, he just wanted people doing work to help, indigent or underrepresented communities who couldn't afford representation. That's why, for example, my practicum, wherever you want to say it falls, that is, it's limited scope work, but it provides a lot of services. So rather than taking one case and working on that for however long, appointed federal counsel, 2 years, 3 years, 6 years, we can do a lot more to help those clients when they first get through the gate, because federal court doesn't appoint anybody as counsel until you're through motion practice, almost. It's different in state courts and family court. But, there were just a lot of rules that were promulgated that we just had to figure out. He said this is what we're gonna do, and then the New York law schools had to figure out how to provide it. We didn't have to,
Right.
because the students can do it on their own if
But
they
we
want to after law school, but of course you wanna make sure you're.
We kind of had to, because then the court said, tell us how you're gonna do it. So we honor you because your time is gonna be good. But what I'd like to do is go around the room and have each of you close with a couple of words about what new idea or what takeaway you're leaving us with. Since it's a small group, we have time to just very quickly do that. Who should I start with?
I know what practicums are now.
Well, we don't know what they are,
Well,
but we're
you know what
trying to
you
go
guys
by
might
them.
include.
Listed before.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Or what they look like.
I'm impressed with what you've done with Little Resource. But
Yeah.
those partnerships are critical and bringing in
Yes.
so many elements from the community, but also providing a valuable service. So hats off.
Well, thank you.
I'm gonna talk to y'all after about how I can actually sell this at my school.
Yeah.
She's like, I just panicked about these rules and trying to figure out how to do
Well,
it.
no, I mean, it's like I said.
Now I have somebody to call, now that once I think about it, that
No,
makes
definitely.
sense.
No, I just don't want us to be in a position, I mean, I know, I'm not concerned because we have so many students who are gonna go to
Right.
New York from, our
Right.
small regional school. It's just that I highly doubt that anybody in our school right now really is familiar with this, knows the pathways, whatever, right? So I feel like it's really important for a law school to understand that first pathway. Because
Right.
when as I was reading, I was like, wait, so then I got stuck on the 15 credits, but then and then I went back to,
I know.
and then I looked at the FAQ, right? So then I thought, okay, well, that makes me feel better, but again, it just, so, I mean, I find all of this helpful. What we did have practice.
So talk to my curriculum today, because I gotta rename some of my courses.